Today's spoiler video is brought to you by Card Kingdom. Use the link below to pre-order your cards today. Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another daily dose of War of the Spark spoilers. And today, we have our first kind of light day of spoiler season. We got some sweet cards to talk about, a couple of rares, some lower rarity stuff, no planeswalkers today. We also have one card that we kind of skipped over before that I wanted to make sure we talked about because it was from a couple days ago, but it's a pretty cool card. So we have some sweet stuff to talk about, but compared to just the massive amount of spoilers earlier in the week, sort of a lighter day here on Daily Spoilers. But still, we should probably jump right into it. Before we do, a couple of reminders. First, for all the latest spoilers, check out MTGPreviews.com. You can sort them, you can filter them by color, rarity, all that stuff. So, super sweet place to keep up on all the latest and greatest. And also, if you haven't already, it would be amazing of you if you could take a second, click that subscribe button down at the bottom of your screen. It's a great way to support the channel and the site for free. So let's talk some new War of the Spark cards, starting with Tolsimir, Friend to Wolves. And Tolsimir is actually pretty sweet. So 5 mana, you get a 3/3 legendary creature Elf Scout, comes along with a friend, a 3/3 wolf token that's green and white and also legendary, and it has a sweet ability. Whenever a wolf enters a battlefield under your control, you gain 3 life and you may have that creature fight up to 1 creature an opponent controls. So in the right matchup, this can be a pretty devastating swing. You get 2 bodies, 6 total power and toughness, you get to gain 3 life, and you get to kill something small on your opponent's side of the battlefield. So Tolsimir kind of reminds me of a few different cards. There's some callback to Huntmaster of the Fells with the wolves and the life gain and the token. Of course, you don't get the flip back and forth action that made Huntmaster so devastating, but still, it's kind of like a bigger Huntmaster when you first play it. A little bit similar to Trostani Discordant in Standard, being a 5-drop that gives you some life and makes some tokens and a lot of power. Regisar Alpha, another comparison. More of a just straight beatdown creature, but still a 5-mana creature that comes along with a 3/3 token. So Tolsimir, I think this card is actually a pretty powerful option. As far as Standard is concerned, it makes Arlen make a little bit more sense. One of the criticisms of Arlen was we just don't really have wolves, but Tolsimir, perfect with the Arlen wolf plan, and Arlen perfect with Tolsimir, making some wolves that are 3/3s and gaining life and fighting things. But I really think that Tolsimir is more of a top-end threat on its own, like especially against aggro. This card is great. Where you play it, you're able to gain 3 life, you get that token fights a, I don't know, Vishino Pyromancer or something to get it off the battlefield. That is a huge swing in life in your favor. Of course, the downside is Trostani is kind of like that. I guess the upside of Tolsimir is it gives you that life right away. Like, as soon as you play this and get that token, you're gaining that 3 life. With Trostani, in theory, you can play it and get those life-linking tokens, but your opponent can still kill you with risk factors and bolts to the face. So it'll be interesting to see where this shakes out as far as Tolsimir. Obviously, the more playable wolves there are, the better, but I don't think you need to be wolf tribal or anything to take advantage of Tolsimir. Just 6 power, 2 bodies, 3 life, kill something small. That's a good enough deal on its own. The other sweet thing about this card is for modern, or probably like casual modern / commander, it works pretty well in wolf decks. We have like Garrix and Arlen cards that make wolves, Master of the Wild Hunt, so you can definitely make a wolf deck. The only problem is most of the wolf cards are a little bit expensive, especially the good ones, and Tolsimir, a little bit odd because it's not wolf or werewolf. It's just straight up wolves is all it cares about. But still, if you can have this just sit out there and play a bunch of wolves, that's a lot of life and a lot of fighting, and it even has combo potential. We've talked before about Turntable Ranger Arcane Adaptation. If you have this out, Turntable Ranger basically keeps triggering itself when the wolf enters the battlefield to keep making more wolves, and a huge Turntable Ranger, because you can make the wolves into allies to trigger Turntable Ranger. Well, if you throw Tolsimir into that mix, as you're making all those wolves, you're gaining infinite life and you're fighting your opponent's entire board, so they're not going to have any creatures left. So it's obviously like janky against the odd style stuff, but still kind of cool to see Tolsimir not only have standard potential as a stand-alone threat that just buffers your life total, gets rid of a creature, but some fun casual ideas too for wolf tribal or for infinite combo potential in the right situation. Next on our list, we have some sweet lower rarity stuff. Leyline Prowler, 3 mana, 2/3, Death Touch, lifelink. Those stats are kind of familiar. Can also tap it to add 1 mana of any color. So this is sort of a callback to a couple of cards we've seen. Originally Vampire Nighthawk, very similar, except Instead of adding mana, it has flying. That trade-off is interesting. I think flying might be more relevant in our current standard, but making mana is a nice little bonus on Leyline Prowler. And then Gifted Aetherborn, kind of a cheaper ground version of Vampire Nighthawk, and Gifted Aetherborn saw a lot of play in standard, still occasionally shows up in modern decks as well, so there's potential there. The other thing is, Leyline Prowler, compared to Gifted Aetherborn, yes, you're paying one more mana, which is kind of a drawback. If you're playing against like mono red, you want your lifelinker down as quickly as possible. But that mana production is a nice little bonus, and the Death Touch, obviously, you can take down Carnage Tyrants, that's one of the biggest upsides. The mana production, though, is really nice in certain decks. If you're playing various, like, Abzan midrange, Sultai midrange, going from 3 mana to 5 mana is pretty relevant. 5 mana gets you to, like, Biogenic Ooze a turn earlier, Vivien Reed a turn earlier, Trostani Discordant a turn earlier, so there is upsides to this mana production, so you basically get a good creature on its own that also could get you to even better, more powerful threats a turn earlier. So I wouldn't be surprised to see people at least trying out Leyline Predator. Taking down Carnage Tyrant, a big deal. Good stats, buffer your life total against mono red, a big deal. Getting to those 5 drops a turn earlier, also a big deal. So all around, I think this card's actually a pretty good one. We also got Death Sprout, which is kind of an interesting removal / ramp spell. So 4 mana, instant speed, destroy a creature, tutor for a basic land, put it on the battlefield. Basically, for 4 mana, you're getting a rampant growth combined with a murder, all at instant speed. So, Death Sprout, similar to how we were talking about our last card, the biggest upside here is it gets you from 4 mana to 6 mana, and 6 mana is kind of a sweet spot in a deck like Sultai Midrange, where you're getting up to a bigger Hydroid Crossus, you're getting to Vraska Relic Seeker, you're getting to Carnage Tyrant a turn earlier, so that ramp is definitely relevant. The biggest question is that ramp worth playing a slightly worse removal spell? In that same slot, you can be playing something like Vraska's Contempt, which, yeah, doesn't get you a land, but it gets rid of a Planeswalker if you need it to, and it buffers your life total. So there's a lot of competition there. You also have like Status Statue, which trades in the ramp for hitting artifacts and enchantments, which is kind of nice. So we'll see where this actually falls. I like this card a lot. Ramping is pretty relevant. 4 mana for blowing up any creature isn't that bad rate-wise, but really, I think you do need to be taking advantage of that ramp somehow. If you are playing this consistently and getting to Carnage Tyrant Vraska, it is a very powerful effect, though, where you're kind of getting a natural 2-for-1 by getting that land and getting something really powerful on the battlefield a turn earlier. We also got, a bunch of stuff. Roll Inversion is fun. 3 mana, you get to switch control of 2 target permanents that share a type, so you can, like, steal a land of your opponents by giving them your land. So take their Iskanta, let's say, and give them a basic land. You can take their Teferi by giving them your Tibalt, maybe, or whatever horrible Planeswalker you might be playing in more of the Spark Standard, or trade in a Fanatical Firebrand for a Crackling Drake. Things like that. So it's a fun card. Maybe there's some sideboard potential for certain matchups, but this doesn't seem like something you just slam in the main deck of most decks. Bulwark Giant, it gains you a lot of life. 5 life is nice. On the other hand, it's also a lot of mana. 6 mana for a 3/6. That might just be too much. Probably fine in limited. And Banehound, while a creepy Nightmare Hound, it's only a 1/1. It is a tiny little hound, so not as scary as you would think. Even with lifelink and haste, 1/1 for 1, I don't know. Maybe if there's some mono-black aggro deck that can boost its creature somehow, there's potential, but not really excited for this one in standard or limited. These cards are often trap-ish in limited, although probably someone's going to be putting like Curious Obsessions and enchantments on it, and it's going to be great, and I'm going to be completely wrong, but in general, 1/1s for 1, even with a bunch of abilities, kind of mediocre. Then we got a couple of weirds. Spellgorger Weird and Spellkeeper Weird, and these are actually pretty powerful cards. Spellgorger Weird, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you get a counter on it, and you start off as a 3 mana 2/2. Spellkeeper Weird, not as exciting. You get to return an instant or sorcery from your graveyard for your hand, 3 to cast, a nice defensive 1/4 body, 2 mana to activate. I think Spellkeeper Weird is more of just a fine limited card. Put up some defense, get some value in the late game. Spellgorger Weird, on the other hand, actually has some potential, I think. We've seen Mana Gorger Hydra and Deeproot Champion, these similar cards, be close to being playable. Obviously, Mana Gorger Hydra triggers off any spell and has trample, so it's pretty much better in most situations. But we have Deeproot Champion in Standard, we have Spellgorger Weird in Standard, so maybe we can actually just build a deck that's looking to play like Temur, Miracle Grow Spirals, Op, Shocks, grow these threats really huge, smash our opponent, win the game. So I wouldn't be surprised to at least see people trying to build around Spellgorger Weird in Standard. Whether or not it actually makes it, that remains to be seen. Deeproot Champion has been in the format for a long time, hasn't really broken out outside of like some budget Magic decks we've played. So we'll see if having an additional 3-mana copy is a big deal or not, but it sounds like a fun deck to try at least. Temur, Spellslinger, Miracle Grow, build these huge threats and hopefully use them to take down the opponent. Otherwise, this is a card that we didn't talk about earlier for some reason. I don't know how we missed it, but it's a sweet one. Vivien's Arkbow. So Vivien's Arkbow, 2 mana, legendary artifact. You can pay X, discard a card, and you get to look at the top X cards of your library and put a creature with converted mana cost X or less from among them onto the battlefield. The rest go to the bottom on a random order. So Vivien's Arkbow, I think this card, while it sort of strikes me as like a fixed version of Birthing Pod or Survival of the Fittest or something similar to Evolutionary Leap, somewhere in that family of cards, I think this card actually has potential to be incredibly powerful in certain matchups. So Vivien's Arkbow, the upside here is it basically becomes impossible to flood out once you have this card. You can sneak it in on turn 2. It's not going to probably do much for the first few turns, but if you get to that late game top decking scenario and you have a bunch of mana, the upside is if you have Vivien's Arkbow, you can never really whiff on your draw step, because if you draw a land or a spell that, you don't have a target for, a dead removal spell, you can discard it because it doesn't say discard a creature card. It just says discard any card, and then you can discard that, dig very deep in your library with all your mana, and hit whatever, Ravenous Chupacabra, Jade Light Ranger. If you got enough mana, you could be hitting Carnage Tyrants, and this happens at instant speed. You can do this on your opponent's turn, which is also really powerful. So I think this is a card that I definitely expect to see play in Standard. You do need to be a fairly creature-heavy deck to make it good, and it is matchup dependent. You can also flip zip, which is a fun option. I don't know if that's the most competitive option, but a way to draw some cards. I think as far as matchups though, really this is a card that shines in the slower matchups. Against a deck like Blue-White Control or Esper Control, or any of like the sloggy mid-range options, this card is pretty insane because it just sits out and it allows you to never whiff on your draw step. On the other hand, if you're playing against like mono-red, mono-white, decks more on the aggro end of the scale, that's where Vivien's Arkbow is going to be pretty bad. So I think Vivien's Arkbow, worst case, this is a very powerful card for decks like Sultai and Gruul to play in the sideboard specifically for those control matchups. It's just an absurd way to make sure that you never really flood out, you never whiff on your draw step, and in the late game, you can keep up with those Chemister's Insights, Teferis, all those powerful card draw effects from opponents' decks, but it might not make it in main decks just because it does feel very slow and lacking in impact if you run into the aggro matchups, the mono reds, even some of the Is It Phoenix decks, mono white aggro, and those matchups you just can't really afford to pay 2 mana for a spell, pay another 3 mana, 4 mana to activate, and have some chance of just whiffing or hitting a bad creature, a Llanowar Elves or something. So I think it might be a sideboard staple. We'll see. Maybe there's a deck that can actually take advantage of it in the main deck. I think that will mostly depend on the metagame and how aggressive it is. Are we seeing mostly control? This card could slide into main decks as a 2 of, maybe, somewhere in that range, because it is great protection for flooding out and an awesome card for creature decks against control decks. So we'll have to wait and see. The card is undoubtedly powerful. The only question is, where does it line up in the metagame? Does it make it in the main deck or is it a sideboard card? And we will see once War of the Spark comes out. Anyway, those have been our daily War of the Spark spoilers for today. So let me know what you think about all these new cards. What do you think of Tolsimir? How good is that card? What about Vivien's Arkbow, our late edition? Is that card actually going to show up in main decks as a sideboard card? How powerful is it? What deck can you put it in? What about the lower rarity stuff? Is Leyline Prowler going to be good in Standard? What about the cards I wasn't as excited about? Bulwark Giant, Banehound, is there something I'm missing there? Let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.